It's the 8th of May 2019 and Ajax is playing their second leg in their Champions League semi-final against Tottenham Hotspur. As we all know, the Brazilian winger Lucas Moura scores a hat-trick and knocks Ajax out in the dying embers of the game. But in the hearts of many football fans, Ajax was the true winner of that Champions League campaign. 4 years later, in 2023, Ajax is in a relegation battle in the Netherlands, a position they have never ever been in before. And that's not just by bad luck, because if you look at the analytics, they are the worst performing team in the Netherlands. So how could this happen? Well, as odd as it sounds, it all started when one former player decided to pull his pants down and photograph his genitals. This is the story of Ajax's downfall. I mean, Ajax needs no introduction. Everybody knows Ajax. Ajax has always been the most successful club in the Netherlands. In the last decade particularly, they established themselves as unbeatable. They had pretty much become the Bayern Munich of the Netherlands, lifting title after title year after year. They created a huge gap between themselves and the other title contenders PSV and Feyenoord. And not just in quality on the pitch, but also financially. They were profiting from playing Champions League every season, and they were selling their top talents to some of the biggest clubs in Europe, including Frenkie de Jong, Matthijs de Ligt and Antony. And let's go back to 2019 again, when under Erik ten Hag, Ajax thrashed Real Madrid 4-1 in the Champions League. They also beat Juventus to make the semi-final. Now that team had an ideal blend of talent and experience, and Mark Overmars, their technical director, did an amazing job getting this team together. And although their Champions League campaign ended in heartbreak, the country was convinced that this would start a new era. An era where Dutch teams could compete with the teams from the big money leagues. But then in 2022, the day came when Mark Overmars' true colors came to light. Overmars, a married man by the way, took his pants down, photographed his penis and sent it to a female employee at Ajax. And it turned out that this was not the first time that Overmars crossed the line with inappropriate behavior towards female colleagues. This scandal was widely covered in the media, and thus there was no other option for Ajax than to say goodbye to Overmars. And rightly so, because that man was so out of touch with reality at the moment and didn't even realize that he was crossing a line. I mean, his behavior was one of Ajax's best kept secrets. Normally the Dutch media is aware of anything to do with Ajax, and the fact that this has been in the shadows perhaps shows a bit of the masculine inner world at Ajax, where this behavior was perhaps deemed as quite or rather normal. Now, since Overmars left, Ajax has been in decline. Under his tenure, Ajax saw themselves as untouchable, and PSV and Feyenoord were years behind. Now, Overmars has a talent of spotting gems in Europe and in South America. He brought in the likes of Antony, Edson Alvarez, Lisandro Martinez, Kudus and Ziyech, and he also changed the culture of the club. When he started in 2012, Ajax had a salary cap, meaning that any player who plays for Ajax can't earn more than 1 million euros a year. This limit was set by the board, and Overmars had to work closely with Dennis Bergkamp and Wim Jonk. But when Dennis Bergkamp was sacked from the board in 2017 together with the head coach at that time Marcel Keizer, Overmars got more control. He brought in Erik ten Hag from FC Utrecht and he broke open the salary ceiling, bringing in the likes of Dusan Tadic and Daley Blind from the Premier League. When Overmars left after the scandal, ten Hag would still lead Ajax to the title in what would also be his last season in charge before moving to Manchester United. Ajax replaced Overmars with a few inexperienced employees, but also asked their general director Edwin van der Sar to help with the transfer decisions. That summer they sold some of their best players, but they also spent 100 million to bring in the likes of Steven Bergwijn, Kelvin Bessie and Brian Brobby. They brought in Alfred Schreuder to replace Erik ten Hag, a coach who tactically is very strong, but who has always been lacking man management and empathy. Bad relationships between him and players have always been there wherever he goes. And realistically, he has always performed better when he was assistant coach rather than being the main man. I mean, Schreuder obviously didn't last the whole season, and I saw that coming from miles away. And he was replaced by Erik Heitinga, who took over and still led Ajax to the third place. And that third place meant no Champions League football in years, and overall just a very disappointing season. And then came this summer. Ajax wanted to make changes. There was no way they were gonna have such a terrible season as last year. Their general director Van der Sar retired in the summer after he was clearly worn out and even suffered a stroke from all the stress behind the scenes. And a new football director was appointed, Sven Mislintat, who had previously worked at Borussia Dortmund, Arsenal and Stuttgart. Over the years he made quite a reputation for himself, discovering hidden and cheap talents using data. His job was to sell heavily and also reduce the salary ceiling back to the 1 million mark. And he did just that. Tadic left on a free transfer to Fenerbahce. Klaas also left on a free to Inter Milan. He sold Mohamed Kudus and Edson Alvarez for massive fees to West Ham, Jurrien Timber to Arsenal, and he almost made no loss on Calvin Bassey, who was deemed as a failure and unsuitable for Ajax playing style. He then relieved Heitinga of his duties as a head coach and brought in Maurice Stijn, who is a Dutch coach who he deemed as an overachiever. I've personally always liked Stijn. He did very well at ADO Den Haag as well as VVV Venlo, and last season he brought Sparta Rotterdam to the 6th place finish after taking over just a year prior when they were in a relegation battle. The only question mark, however, was his experience at a big club, which was non-existent. Mislintat also brought in 12 new players, and a lot of them didn't really seem Ajax-like. Now, both Mislintat and Stijn needed time because they were gonna do something very different. But the problem is that at Ajax you don't have time. It's the biggest club in the Netherlands and winning a title is a must. Anything less than that is deemed as a failure. Ajax has had one of their worst starts to a season ever. After 8 game weeks they were bottom of the table, a position they have never ever been in before. They were also winless for 10 games across all competitions, which was also the first. Mislintat has already been fired now. Since day one his work was criticized and doubted, and he just brought in a lot of chaos behind the scenes. His relationship with the head coach he brought in, Maurice Stijn, also deteriorated massively. Stijn also attacked Mislintat publicly, saying that he had no say in any of the transfers and was unhappy with the quality. He even said that out of the 12 signings Ajax made, he hadn't even heard of 11 of them and he was only happy with the quality of Josip Soutalo, which is obviously also something that was not well received by the other 11 new signings. It then also turned out that one of Mislintat's signings, Croatian left-back Borna Sosa, who I think is a good player, was represented by the German agency aka Global, which allegedly has a stake in Matchcentrix, where Mislintat also has a share. Ajax then launched an investigation into that transfer to see if Mislintat profited in any way from that transfer, and decided to fire him immediately, much to the delight of the Ajax fans. But that was not all that the Ajax fans wanted, they also wanted Stijn gone. Especially after he was seen out on holiday in Spain during the international break, when the fans just expected him to fix the issues and the terrible displays on the pitch. So after 7 games in charge on the 23rd of October, Stijn was also fired. Now it's still early in the season and things can obviously change around, but another title for Ajax can already be forgotten. On the time of recording, PSV is 25 points ahead and are having one of their best ever starts in their history. They've been unbeaten in the league, winning all their games under a manager who they brought in this summer, Peter Bos, who the Ajax fans desperately wanted to have as their manager. So that is another very bitter pill to swallow. You know, this whole situation feels very surreal, especially to me as a Dutch person. I've never seen Ajax in this position before. And surely it just seems too crazy to think that they will actually relegate. Or is it? Because the underlying numbers show that Ajax is the worst team in the league and almost on every aspect. Former player Rafael van der Vaart, who is now a pundit, even said that Ajax needs to start thinking like a relegation candidate. He said that they are no longer Ajax and that they should stop assuming that they are better than every opponent. Because they simply are not, nor do they have the quality within the squad to be better. The club is desperately trying to shift momentum. The board is changing, they're bringing in more experienced professionals. A more experienced manager in John van het Schip is now also the caretaker manager until the end of the season. Some fans are urging for Overmars to come back because in the meantime he has turned Royal Antwerp in Belgium into winners. But many fans also never want to see him again. The future at the moment seems very hopeless and the clubs and fans are so divided. And it all started to collapse the moment Overmars took a picture of his genitals.